Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to Lesson 4 for the Japji Sahib Mool Mantra Gurbani Study Curriculum. Today we're going over the word Nirbhau. And literally Nirbhau means without fear, as your facilitators have told you. But, as I've been saying every week, we're going deeper than that in this curriculum. We're trying to go beyond just a literal translation of without fear, for example, in this word. So your facilitator has introduced the idea of a good fear and a bad fear. So a good fear, nirmal bhav, and then a bad fear, agyanat bhav. Okay, so just to quickly summarize that one more time, a good fear in Gurbani, nirmal bhav, refers to the idea of discipline. And the idea that because you fear something or someone, here nirmal bhav always refers to the fear of God. So because you're afraid of God in the sense that you're in discipline, you respect his power, you do certain things because you know that he would want you to do them. For example, perhaps you do your nitnem because you do it out of respect for Akal Purakh Vaheguru, or in his discipline, or you keep your rehet for that reason, or you do kirtan for that reason. If you're doing something, even though it's because you're fearful of God or you're doing it in discipline of God, that's seen as a positive fear because it leads you to do something good with your time. As opposed to agyanat bhav, that is fear that results from lack of faith or doubt. So for example, the fear of fitting in college could lead someone to do things that they know the guru wouldn't want them to do, but they do it anyway because the fear of not fitting in is greater than the result of actually committing those actions. The fear is greater than knowing that what you're doing is wrong. So as a result, the actions are not guru-centric, and as a result, that fear that caused the actions becomes an agyanat bhav, becomes a negative fear, not a positive fear. So going over nirmal bhav one more time, a good idea to think, to make it more clear, because I know it's a little confusing, is the idea of having a teacher or a professor in the classroom. Now, for example, think of any one of your classes in college. So you walk in maybe 10 minutes early before class starts, and all your friends are there. It's a big hall, a lot of desks, a lot of chairs, and everyone's talking amongst themselves, right? People are talking about, how their day is going, what they did last weekend, the game that happened a few days ago, whatever. Everyone's talking amongst themselves, they're laughing, they're being loud, maybe they're eating in class, they're on their cell phones, they're watching YouTube videos, people are doing whatever they want to do in the classroom. But then the teacher walks in, and the teacher begins writing on the board and starts to speak. Once she begins speaking, once the professor begins speaking, suddenly everyone that was doing all of these other things, they were talking with their friends, they were on their phones, they were watching videos, they were being loud and walking around the room. Suddenly everyone quiets down, they sit down, and they focus on whatever the professor is saying. And suddenly there's a discipline in the room. Now no one's going to start talking loudly with their friend because they know the professor is there. There is a fear of making the professor upset. There is a fear of disrupting the rules of the classroom, the rules that the professor has stated, the rule that, you can't get up and start walking around in the middle of class. No, that's not allowed in this classroom because the professor is watching. That fear, that discipline is what drives those students to act in a positive way. Now, if the teacher were to suddenly leave the room and she has to go take a call or whatever, she has to take a break outside, suddenly you'll notice everyone in the class goes back to what life was like before the professor. Everyone's talking again. Everyone is walking around, watching videos, texting, being loud. Why? Because that discipline, the person that was maintaining that discipline, the one that people were afraid of, has now left the room. So as a result, there's no more fear. And as a result, they start acting in a way that isn't positive. Now that concept is called hazuri, being in hazuri, being in God's presence. So now, instead of the professor, replace that professor with God, Akal Purakh Vaheguru. And the classroom is your entire life, in the sense that God is watching us all the time. He is within us, He's around us, He's in our head, He's in our heart, He's everywhere. So a Sikh that lives his or her life in accordance to knowing that God is present, which we call living in Hazuri, has nirmal bhav, has the fear of God, has that discipline of doing what the Guru says to do, because they're living in Hazuri, they're living in God's presence. And those that are not living in Hazuri, those that forget that God is watching and is with them and is inside of them, those that forget that or choose not to act on that, they fall into the traps of a Gyanat Bhav. They don't have that fear of God. They don't have that fear of breaking that discipline. And as a result, their actions are conducted based on these other fears, Agyanat Bhav, these bad fears, because the results of their actions are things that the Guru wouldn't want them to do in the first place. So think of it like that. Nirmal Bhav is a positive fear. It's reminding you to live in Hazuri, that God is with you, God is watching what you're doing. As a result, do things that the Guru wants you to do because he's watching you, he's listening to you all the time. And Agyanat Bhav refers to those people that don't live in Hazuri, that don't really believe or remember or care that God is listening and is with them and is watching what they're doing. And as a result, they let other fears dictate their actions. And those actions inevitably take them away from the Guru. So I hope that clarifies the idea of positive and negative fear. But eventually, though, a Sikh, the goal of a Sikh is to get to a point where you're doing all of these positive things, not out of the fear of God, but more out of love for God. So for example, if you're doing your Nitnem every morning based on this fear of God, being in discipline, that's good. That's a great start. It's good to be fearful of God, right? It's good to be in Hazuri and to have that discipline in your life. But eventually, we want to get to a spiritual stage where we're doing the same things. We're doing our Nitnem, we're keeping our Rehet, we are learning Kirtan and Rag, singing Kirtan and Rag, we are meditating. We're doing all of these things because we love God so much and we want to do what God tells us to do out of love. And that's a different type of discipline. So we want to eventually move away from acting out of fear to acting out of love. But again, Nirmal Bhav is a fantastic starting point. Most people aren't even there. Most people don't live in fear of God. That doesn't exist for most people. So Nirmal Bhav is where you want to start, but eventually, hopefully, it should lead to acting out of love. And of course, at the same time, we should right now strive to get rid of our fears that take us away from God, those agyanat bhavs, those negative fears. And of course, we should try to replace those with nirmal bhav, with living in hazuri and living in discipline. So again, I know this is probably more than you were expecting when you saw nirbhav or without fear. Done. Move on to the next one. Fear is a complicated topic in Sikhi. So again, I want to emphasize we're trying to move beyond just a simple rough English translation. There's a shabad by Bhai Gurdas ji that talks about, if you want to find the most beautiful pearls in the world, you can't just literally go into 2-foot deep water and look near your feet and you'll find these beautiful pearls. But where are those beautiful pearls? Those are hundreds of feet beneath the surface, beneath the water. You have to go and dive deep into the water, deep into the ocean, and dig there. And there you're going to find those beautiful pearls, right? Think about gold, for example. Gold isn't in the bushes. It isn't hanging on the trees. It isn't just in the grass. Gold mines are so deep into the ground. You have to really work hard and dig deep into the ground to find that gold. Similarly, for Gurbani, it's no different. If we always in our life are on the surface level knowledge of Gurbani, we know the basic translations, we know the basics, we know the most fundamental principles. That's fine. It's a good start. But if you want to experience that gold, you want to experience the beautiful pearls of Sikhi, the most prominent and most meaningful spiritual connections that Sikhi can provide through the Guru, we have to dig deep into the Bani. We have to go beyond just our basic translations, our basic knowledge. We have to dig much deeper. And that's what we're trying to do in this course. Dig deeper into the Mool Mantra, dig deeper into Japji Sahib. And by no means is this going super deep either. We're going lower than surface level, but I wouldn't say it's super, super deep. But again, you make progress, you take baby steps. It's not a good idea if you've never been in the water to jump down 100 feet on your first time, right? That's never a good idea. So we hope that going over Nirbhau right now provides you with a deeper understanding of this word and provides you with more complexity, more a different view, all these different ideas that are around Nirbhau as well. And then lastly, turning to page 42, Guru Arjan Dev Ji beautifully and simply in Sukhmani Sahib states, Nirbhau japai sagal bhau mitae. Basically summarizing the idea that if you focus on God, if you act in a Guru-centric way, if you live in Hazuri, therefore you meditate on God, you remember God. God is Nirbhau, right? He's fearless. As a result, you will also become fearless. You will also do everything out of love, and you will get rid of your agyanat bhau. You will get rid of all of your negative fears if you follow the Guru's way. If you do Nirbhau Jape, if you meditate, if you remember and act on God. So with that, I will see you next week. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.